Hey, what's up guys, Impulse7 here, and in this video I'm going to be doing a summary on the final story in Fazbear Frights Book 10. Sorry for the delay on this video, a lot of things were just getting in the way, but yeah, I don't want to waste any time, so let's just get straight into this. So the epilogue starts with Larson at the police station investigating the building where he'd found the ball pit. Obviously we know it's Jeff Pizza, and it had originally been Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, but it seems like a lot of work was done to hide that fact, so Larson doesn't know that yet. The only one left at the station was Chansey, who was introduced in a previous epilogue. Larson waves him over to help him with trying to figure out who currently owns the building. Chansey gives it a shot, but says he can't figure it out just from a quick search, and Larson asks him if he could figure it out if he spent more time on it, and he agreed to try his best to do so. So Larson lets Chansey have at it, and looks around to make sure no one is around. So then Larson goes through a file on the blood samples. After a couple hours, he was able to link them to missing persons cases. Oftentimes, kids or teenagers would come across a mannequin thingy and would go missing soon after. The mannequin was a female clown. It took me about 7 seconds before I realized that this is exactly what happened to Sarah in To Be Beautiful. It seems like this epilogue is actually telling us that Sarah was not the only one Eleanor did that to, and I find that really interesting. Some of the teenagers didn't have anything to do with Eleanor, but all of them seemed to line up with the blood in the ball pit. But Larson knows it can't belong to them because it was always the blood of the same person. So Larson looks through photos of missing teenagers and notices that behind one of the girls was actually Eleanor. So now Larson knew she was real and what she looked like. It's also mentioned that she has deep dark pits for eyes, just like the puppet carver Fazbear as well as the Afton amalgamation. Larson kept going through the photos and came across a name, Dr. Talbert, a man who apparently specializes in something called Remnant. Okay then. By people who had seen it, Remnant was described as looking like a bubbling liquid mercury. No one besides Talbert had been able to get their hands on it, and so no one else knew what it did. So then we cut to Jake and Rennell. If you remember the end of the last epilogue, Jake sets out to find Rennell's father and reunite them, but we also found out that Rennell is Eleanor, so I don't think that's going to go very well. So after a few days of searching, Jake thinks he's found her dad. Jake had been trying to touch her to see if he could see her memories, but they were really unclear. You know, because she's a robot, because she's Eleanor. Interestingly, Rennell was braiding her hair into pigtails, which I think is just to reference further that she is Eleanor. Jake didn't think Rennell would be completely happy with him wanting to take her home, but when he told her, she was like, alright, when? And so they just went. When they got to the house, they rang the doorbell, and the door just unlatched for some reason. A voice spoke as if he thought it was like a delivery or something, and they stepped inside and looked around. Jake notices a photo of two men. He knew one had to be Rennell's father, but he also recognized the second man as the man who put the Stitchwraith together, and he had also learned previously that his name was Phineas. So yeah, this is Phineas. Phineas and Talbert are friends, which is pretty interesting. Jake also noticed a picture of a man and his daughter, but the girl in the picture looked nothing like Rennell. The girl in the picture had curly black hair and brown eyes. Then we cut to Larson. Chansey had finished his research and directed Larson to a house. The door to the house was wide open, and what a coincidence, it's the exact same house. As he steps into the house, he sees the Stitchwraith staring there with Rennell, who he only recognizes as a young girl with unwashed hair and pigtails. But right after that, Rennell transforms into the girl in the photo. Rennell becomes the girl with curly black hair and brown eyes. As Larson sees it, she looks so young and innocent, but he knows she's not innocent. Suddenly, Larson begins to have another vision like he had from the ball pit. Staring at Rennell, she suddenly turns into Eleanor, and somehow, the name Eleanor pops up in Larson's mind. At this point, I was just like, what the f*** is Jake doing? Like, he's just standing there pretending nothing is happening. Anyways, Larson keeps looking at Eleanor, and he begins to realize that Eleanor is, quote from the book, black chaotic force that fed on human suffering. The fear, the pain, the death, she, not the Stitchwraith, was the cause of it. In both his head and his heart, Larson knew this to be true. He was surer of it than he had been of anything in his life. He was so sure that he drew his gun and took aim. The girl's eyes met his. She smiled. The room fell away, as did everything familiar. Larson's eyes fluttered, then shut, and he fell to the floor with a thud. "Eleanor," he whispered before he lost consciousness. So, yeah, that happened. And so, yeah, he blinks and realizes he's now in, like, the void, or whatever, and he turns and sees Eleanor next to a table working on a plush rabbit. She begins stuffing things into its mouth, first a tooth, then another, and another, until it has a full set of human teeth. Larson notices that the rabbit has human eyes that look like they were staring at him. Basically, this is explaining that the plush trap chaser from Out of Stock was made by Eleanor, or at least altered by Eleanor. Eleanor laughs, then disappears. The room he's in changes. Larson looks around to see a clock on a stove announcing that it's 1:35 a.m. As he looks around, he sees a woman panicking in bed, saying, "It's the doll." Larson looked out the window to see Eleanor out there scratching it. Obviously, this part is referencing the story of 1:35 a.m., and the woman in bed is Delilah. What I think this is telling us is that Eleanor is the one who is committing all the acts in that story, trying to drive Delilah crazy, rather than it being the Ella doll. Or at least, she could be controlling the Ella doll in a certain way. I could be wrong, but that's what it seems like it's saying. Then Larson fell into the doorway of an operating room. On the operating table lay a boy. There were 2 surgeons there, and Eleanor was at his back holding him down. Larson thought they were going to do something bad to the boy and rushes in, but when he gets to the table, he sees the man in room 1280, aka William Afton. Eleanor reappears from out of his chest. Some of her parts were made from William's tissue and organs. Then Larson appears in the hide-and-seek game. He chases Eleanor through the maze of the game. Eventually, he finds a dead kid with wooden pegs driven through his back, and the kid was smiling. This kid is, of course, Toby, since in hide-and-seek, the ending was exactly this. Toby is satisfied with killing himself to escape Shadow Bonnie. Then he's brought outside to a railroad track. Larson, not Toby. He sees Eleanor on the tracks holding a kid wearing a weird bird costume. When Larson gets closer, Eleanor drops him and takes off down a field. Larson pushes the kid in the bird costume off the tracks, and he falls into a ditch. A ditch? This is, of course, Blackbird. Sam, with the Blackbird costume, almost gets hit by a train, but apparently dodges it just in time and ends up stuck in a ditch for a few days. Then we get to Jake's perspective. He's so confused as to what's happening. After all, he's a 9-year-old kid. He thinks of Eleanor as not Renelle until he realizes she is Eleanor. And I find it interesting that he calls her not Renelle when previously in this book, during the story Sea Bonnies, Mott refers to the Sea Bonnie taken Fritz as not Fritz. Dr. Talbert shows up and hugs Eleanor, thinking Eleanor is his daughter Renelle, even though she's not. So Jake is just pissed off, and he pushes Renelle back against a wall with a bunch of shells and stuff. He also realizes Eleanor had been the greater evil that had powered Afton. After Jake pushes her against the wall, she screams out in pain as if she had been stabbed. But Jake hadn't done it, which he knew from the fact that he had no blood on him, so he assumed she stabbed herself. But Dr. Talbert is pissed at what he thinks Jake has done, and legit pulls out a gun and shoots him 3 times. One of the bullets hits his battery pack and knocks him down. After that, Talbert tells Eleanor that Remnant will save her. Eleanor is really happy about this since she wants Remnant, I guess, and Jake was able to feel from Eleanor that Remnant is, and I quote, power, life, eternal. Talbert began to hook Eleanor up to an IV to inject Remnant into her. Eleanor smiles at Jake, who is upset, of course. I mean, Eleanor won. Jake can't move. Larson was mumbling a little bit, but he seemed unconscious still. Then Eleanor reveals her true form and sits up. Talbert moves backwards, horrified, and that's where the epilogue ends. To me, that was hands down the best epilogue, without a doubt. As for the lore in it, I think we've gone over almost everything throughout the summary, but I'd like to mention that I find it interesting how Eleanor, who is pretty much baby, gets a remnant inside her. I think that may be to further prove that maybe baby actually has a remnant inside her in the games. Obviously Elizabeth possesses her, but it's possible she's also infused with remnant. This epilogue really interests me because it's basically telling us that everything we know about these Fazbear Frights books has been a lie. Originally we thought Andrew was the one who infected all the objects with agony, but now we've learned that it was actually Eleanor who did. It wasn't Andrew. Or was it? There's been some theories going around that Andrew is actually Eleanor, which may sound a bit weird at first, but it actually makes some amount of sense considering that Renelle actually has curly black hair just like Andrew. So maybe Renelle projected herself as Andrew, pretended to be Andrew for all this time, and is actually Eleanor. Like I said, it sounds a bit weird at first, but it actually makes some amount of sense. I might make a separate video about this epilogue talking about all the lore and theories and stuff, but we'll just see about that. Either way, I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please do leave a like and subscribe. Pretty soon I'm going to be doing a ranking of all the stories in this book, so stay tuned for that, and I'll see you all in the next video. Impulse7 out, and peace.